As mentioned in one of my earlier stories of my brother and I playing Army with the little plastic Army men, it brought to my memory, particularly fond memory, of the creative ways that my brother and I treated our toys. Most kids play with Army men and, set them up, pretend they're shooting, pretend they're crawling, whatever. Well, my brother and I were a creative bunch. And I don't remember whether it was me or my brother. I think it was me, because I tend to think in bizarre ways. I said to my brother, these Army men could be a lot more interesting if we would mutate them. And my brother was like, mutate them? I said, yeah. We should make these Army men into monsters. So my brother was curious as to how we could make Army men into monsters. I mean, we'd already taken pin snips and done things like snip their arms off and stuff. And I know that sounds really crazy, and maybe gruesome, but we were little kids. So the thing we came up with that would be an interesting way to modify our Army men into mutants was we would either clip or saw them in half, and then we would either clip or saw a head off of an Army man, and then we would get the plastic very hot, either by holding it near the fire on the gas range or soldering iron, whatever. We would melt the plastic and get both parts of the Army man gooey. So you'd have a gooey Army man with no head, but his shoulders were gooey. Then you'd have the other Army man that you had cut the legs off of, and you would get his lower torso gooey. Then we would put the two gooey, melting parts together, and you would have an Army man that had a huge long torso and 4 arms. Well, after our first success at that, we began doing all kind of things, like cutting arms off and having arms coming out of the Army man's head, having feet, extra feet. Sometimes we would, kind of make our own Stretch Armstrong frozen position Army men, where we'd have a guy we would heat up the arm, and then we would pull it out where it was really long and gooey, and then we'd drop it in a little bowl of cold water, be frozen like that. So before we were reading Fantastic Four, and before there was the comic book, with a stretchy guy, and before we saw Stretch Armstrong, my brother and I were already making these fantastic kind of bizarre-looking Army men. And so then it began the argument of who would get to be the commander of the mutant Army men versus the non-mutant Army men. And we traded off. Sometimes I let my brother play with the mutant Army guys against the regular guys, and I thought it was fascinating, the sort of bizarre morphed human creatures with 2 heads and 6 arms and all this stuff we used to do. Sometimes we used to melt animal, dinosaur parts or animal parts off and add them to the men so the men would have like a dinosaur head. I mean, it was so awesome what we came up with. But I guess the funniest thing that we used to do, my brother and I would just make up words to describe things, words we'd never heard of before. But we had to name these mutant Army men. So we came up with the Klandors. Klandor. These guys were the Klandors. And it forever became an institution in the mutant Army men legacy. John and Mark invented the Klandors. I'll have